Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So an honor to be with Sunnahfollowers. In fact, when Brother Youssef last Sunday, Sister Layla in touch with you, we have to be live also in our website. Sister Layla?
He's here. I don't know if she can respond.
Oh, okay. All right, so this is the first time we listen to you, inshallah. By the way, mashallah, thousands of sisters all over the world.
Okay.
So we're going to introduce yourself about yourself, inshallah, and then we're going to speak about the topic together. About yourself, inshallah.
Hey, assalamu alaikum to our new viewers. When we can expand the message, the better. I'm very excited to have you guys here and on this prospect, of course, to reach a wider, audience. My name is Youssef. I've been a Muslim now for 14 years. I don't like talking about myself too much, but this lovely gentleman here, he provided me with the opportunity of a lifetime. I've been a teacher, facilitator, and educator also for the same time I've been a Muslim. And I always wanted to do this as a big part of my life. I wanted to go around and raise the message, raise awareness, and instill Islamic consciousness and pride in people all over the world, not just here in the country that I reside. So again, tremendous opportunity. We're hoping to do a lot of good work here. I'm looking forward to it tonight. Very, very important topic coming.
In fact, brother and sister in Sunnahfollowers last week, Brother Youssef talked about Tawheed and Aqeedah. In fact, the good things speaking the understanding of Tawheed and Aqeedah was perfect. Alhamdulillah, you know us, Sunnahfollowers and I, we always about the Aqeedah is number one in our life. And alhamdulillah, it was perfect. And today, the most beautiful thing about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In fact, it's a little bit about Rasulullah. In fact, if we ask Christians and Jews and Muslims, do you love Allah? Do you love God? Everyone says we love God. But our God, Allah is Wahid, the only one. And we believe Isa alayhi salam and Jesus alayhi salam, all the prophets in the Quran, 25 prophets, we believe they are messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah Azza wa Jalla يقول سورة آل عمران أعوذ بالله من الشيطان قل إن كنتم تحبون الله فاتبعوني يحبكم الله ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم. The ayah after that, قل أطيعوا الله والرسول is an order. If you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you follow me, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then the ayah after, قل أطيعوا الله, obey Allah and obey the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's a long topic, we're going to see inshallah more and more, but I will let you know now, we're going to learn from Brother Youssef, inshallah, about the understanding our new Muslim few years ago about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Okay, as he said, the main difference we notice between ourselves and our opponents is this question of this man. This man I'm taking on the very stiff challenge of tonight. Who am I to talk about, in our belief, the greatest man that ever walked the face of the earth? A man who is the representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this world, and the final one. I'm very nervous about this presentation. While last week I didn't really have any nerves at all, because I know how daunting this task is. No man is criticized more, in the social media, in blogs, and websites than our beloved Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What we are going to do tonight, I'm going to take on a challenge that I have not seen covered too much in the Ummah. I want to prove his divinity using their arguments. I'm going to do that. I'm going to show through his life, responding to their challenges of him, how there is no doubt that he is the messenger of Allah. Through conduct, through the way he was received by others, through his deeds, his selflessness. We are going to explore quite a bit of seerah tonight. And I will prove his divinity, that he was sent from the divine without even mentioning the Quran. That is the aim of the presentation tonight. So many times we look to the Quran, and we know the Quran is a special place in our hearts, speech of our Creator. And it's hard to talk about Islam without talking about the Quran. But this man's life was a living Quran. The way he lived, the way he treated others is an inspiration to us all. So I want to say, in the name of Allah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, I don't make any mistakes tonight. I deliver this thing clear and concise, and I represent our Prophet to the best of our ability. With that being said, last week, for those of you who were with me, I talked about the 5 pillars and traps of the modern world. And I said there's a big part of the other pillar, number 1, the Shahada, that we're not going to cover this week because we already had this lecture planned for week number 2. And of course, we all know what that second part of that Shahada, is. And that's why, again, we are here tonight. So what does the Messenger of Allah mean to us? People in the West, they see Muslims get very angry when they make fun of our Prophet in the media, when they draw disgusting, heinous cartoons depicting him, which are nothing short of blasphemous lies. They often wonder, why do we love this man so much? When you talk to them, you find out they've never even picked up a book. They know very little. They may know what they read from a blog, from an unknown author, someone who is an authority all of a sudden on Islam because he read one book, and they've already made up their mind. Before I was Muslim, I heard so much slander in the break room of Walmart back in 2005 about our beloved messenger, from guys who literally could not even tell you one aspect of his life. But I noticed something peculiar. I did not see the same treatment from other religious figures who Christians profess not to believe in. Joseph Smith, the supposed prophet of Mormonism, he was a man who lived a highly questionable life. I never saw any condemnations, blogs and things dedicated to his life. Why our messenger? We're going to go through a lot of that tonight as to why. Why do the enemies of Islam want to attack our messenger? He is the cornerstone. He's everything that holds this, together. Why would Allah send a man? That's a question that was asked during the time of the message. It's a question I've been asked by many atheists over the course of my life. Wouldn't God send a sign? He's God. Wouldn't he just appear, in person? Why would he send the messenger? And this is a Quranic ayah. I said I wouldn't mention the Quran, but in this context we need to, where the challenge was to God. Why don't they send down an angel? Why don't you do that? If you're speaking on behalf of God, where is the angel? Where is the miracle? The miracle was the messenger. Allah said that he sent him as a mercy to mankind. What did he mean? By having a man gives us something that, we can identify with. It's a standard that we as humans can strive to achieve. If God sent an angel who's only programmed to follow the commands of Allah, how could a human being live up to an angel? There would be no purpose. But by seeing this man did it. You can do it too. You can have a heart of gold like this man. He is human of flesh and blood. He died. He got sick. He got tired and fatigued. If this man can be this type of human being, so can you. And that was the wisdom, of the messenger. So tonight's presentation, we are going to defend our messenger in 3 phases. We are going to look at the 3 attacks, which I have put into 3 different categories. They all fall under the term that we hear a lot, known as a cult leader. This is the number 1 challenge against him. They say we follow a cult. They say our messenger was a cult leader. So what I have done is we're going to contrast the lives of cult leaders. We are going to look at traditions and things that you see inside of cults. And then we are going to look at the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We are going to do this in 3 phases. First, we are going to look at power, money, and women. These are the 3 main things cult leaders are after. We're going to compare how each one of these tenets applies to the life of our messenger. So what motivates cult leaders? You've seen the famous one that you guys are familiar. There's Jim Jones. In recent times, we had David Koresh. We had very famous in the Waco incident. We've had Joseph Smith in Mormonism. Every month or so, you see another guy coming in the media. He says he's Jesus, and he's come again, and follow him. You see them all the time. One of the main things that you see, basically, of cult leaders is they immediately are grasping for power and control over the people that follow them. You see this basically with Jim Jones. He took all of his followers down to South America, where they actually built a camp called Jonestown, of course, named after him, where they did all the work. Obviously, he sat back and lived like a king. And you saw all those people and so many people were calling, this is how Jim Jones was later, dealt with, so to speak, was because all the abuse The things that were going on down in that compound, people were running for their lives. People were scared of the way that they were treated. When cult leaders are faced, as we've seen throughout the history with Joseph Smith, Jim Jones, again, example, L. Ron Hubbard of Scientology is another one we're going to look at off and on. The first sign of trouble, there goes the message. It's pretty much thrown away because they want an easy life. They want easy control. Did our messenger of Allah have an easy life? No. We have a period of time where you had killings and murders taking place of people for just simply saying La ilaha. You had the family of Yasser, the first martyrs in Islam, tortured and killed in the hot desert. The slave Bilal who converted, they used to lay him in the ground, basically in the hot desert sun. They would place stones on his chest, just trying to get him to take back those words. And all he did was lay there and continue to say La ilaha illallah. The messenger was disturbed, by this, as any compassionate human would be, because these people did not have the same family protections of the tribes that he had. So what did he do? He sent them to Abyssinia twice to provide relief for his followers. That right there is a sign of commitment from the followers as well as him. Traditionally, we see with Jim Jones and L. Ron Hubbard, they could care less, about their followers. They are looking at people as property, a means to an end. Rasulullah grieved tremendously for what happened to these people and provided them every haven he possibly could give them to be safe. The Muslims endured hardships for 3 years. Could you imagine? People right now are complaining to me in Ramadan for 3 hours. These people endured starvation and boycotts on the outskirts of Mecca for 3 years. Babies crying. No one would trade with the Muslims. A caravan would come in. The Meccans would send people to greet them at the gate. And they'd say, don't trade with those people. Bad news. And they endured, all of them, including himself, for 3 years. If the messenger was only after, money and power, which we're going to look at next, he certainly would have quit after 3 long years of suffering and hardship. Only a true message coming from the one true God can maintain that motivation. And I often say to brothers and sisters in conversation, I say, anytime your life is down, you suffer for what, 2 days? Imagine suffering consistently from starvation and uncertainty for 3 years. Imagine being so strong in your conviction that you could lay in the hot desert with men mocking you, spitting at you, laying hot stones on your chest and still professing La ilaha illallah. We complain about fasting in Ramadan. It's too hot in July. I got to fast. I got to go to work, and all of these things. Sorry, 1 second. The messenger of Allah had stones thrown at him when he went to Taif. Children hurling rocks, calling him names and mocking him. As we're going to look at later, this was a man who loved children. This was a man whose children were very close to him. Having this humiliation, this feeling of what had to be worthlessness. And there are numerous hadiths that chronicle this in the Sirah of him calling out to Allah, am I not doing my job right? Am I failing? Give me a sign. And things got very bad for the Muslims in the early days. And as I said, when you look at traditional cult leaders, the first sign of trouble, they run. Our messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he got more strong, more convinced, and more determined, than ever. The next thing they love to say, with particularly our prophet, but also as a trait of cult leaders, as you look at them, they pursue the worldly gains. They are big on money. If anyone here is familiar with the Church of Scientology, this man literally constructed a religion that in order to be closer to yourself, which is God in their religion, you have to pay about $500,000 US to go through his trainings. What about salvation there? God needs money. $500,000 per person. L. Ron Hubbard's intentions were clear from the beginning when he founded this cult that they call a religion. This religion's Tom Cruise is a member. We have numerous members of Hollywood. They're not some small group down at the local gym. These guys have been all over the world. They've grossed billions and billions of dollars with this. But it was clear from the beginning that this was a religion for money. Now, what was our messenger? How was he, with money? We look at the first example, his marriage to Khadijah. Anyone who's familiar with the story of Khadijah, may she be happy, in the afterlife, in paradise, for her contributions and what a great woman she was. Khadijah was one of the wealthiest women, in Mecca. She was a self-made woman. She was a merchant. She had a big business. The Messenger of Allah married her when she was 40, he was 25. They had money. Their family was not in need. They were not missing a meal. They were well fed, well respected, taken care of. The Messenger of Allah, when he started getting his preaching, in Mecca, there were several times he was proposed through his uncle Abu Talib. Please tell your nephew to stop. Whatever you can do, we will offer everything to him. What does he want? They had 360 idols in the Kaaba. So if you, as an example, if you want to come to see one of your gods, we're going to make money off you coming and visiting. You've got another one in there. Come. The more gods we fill, inside, the more money we are going. We have 360. That's 360 different religions. We can all fit inside. And the Messenger of Allah was saying, no, there's only one. That's bad for business. What are you going to do with all these other people? That's 359. 361, however many they had on each day changes, are not going to come anymore. You're going to kill our trade. You've got to go. And they offered him everything. They said, you want power, you want prestige, you want position, you want women. Whatever it is, it's yours. And he said one of my favorite lines, and I got chills when I read this the first time back in 2011. He said, you can put the sun in my right hand, you put the moon in my left. No way. I'm paraphrasing the last parts of the American terminology there, but no way. Because who I answer to is much more than any worldly thing that you've given. What I've been called to do is much more than any worldly thing that I can be given by you. If he was motivated by money, that's a tough bargain. And I'm going to be the most powerful man in Mecca. If he was motivated by money, he would have kept the 360 idols, wouldn't he? I mean, it would have been a lot more financially sensible, because he could have sold his, services there as keeper of the Kaaba to a lot more people. The one God message was not profitable. So we can already see some problems coming up with this argument. They like to say that he was obsessed, with money. Another thing they like to use, and I've heard this one many times, not the wife's thing, we're going to get to that one, later, inshallah, is they talk about he got spoils of war. This is proof that he's a warlord. A prophet would not profit from fighting. But what did he do with the spoils? In his hadiths, in abundance of the charity of this man. He would walk home, pay dowries for poor, brothers to get married. There's a famous story. A gentleman came in the masjid. He said, hey, you owe me money. And Rasulullah, in his gentle way, as always, saw him. He said, pray 2 rak'ah. The guy prays 2 rak'ah in respect. He gave him the money he owed him and more. There are several stories we can find in our hadith literature chronicling the generosity. I'm going to get to a very one of me that really touched me a lot also here in a few moments of his generosity. He was a head of state. He had investments, things to do to build this ummah, to spread this message. You did not see him living in palaces. Someone recently, it's very good material, I cannot remember where I saw it, about a year ago, they had reconstructed what him and his wife's homes looked like, in the original old Medina. So simple, so plain. It wasn't loud. He didn't wear the fanciest of silks. He didn't wear all these clothing. Usually you see warlords. You see, unfortunately, some caliphs later in Islamic history, unfortunately, with robes and crowns and these things. Not the Messenger of Allah. Humble, simple in every aspect of his life. One major thing, going back to the booty, they call it, the 1/5 of the spoils, is a lot of these attacks, they come from Christians. Most of them, actually. Well, I just did a little bit of research the other day because I couldn't remember. I knew I was right. It's one of those things where you have to go and prove you're right, and yet you have to get the data. So I went through and I looked at Numbers 31. This chronicles Moses and Elijah, who was the chief Israeli priest at that time in their battle with Midianites. Now you can see here, according to the policy, 1/2 of the spoils of war went to the priest, Elijah. 1/2, I'm pronouncing the name correctly. I calculated this was in the Bible. 375,000 sheep, 36,000 cattle, 16,000 people just went to one man alone. And they had one small provision. You had to give about 2% of that to good works. So out of the 375,000 sheep, he donated 675. Out of the 36,000 cattle, 72. Out of the 16,000 people, he donated 32 to the tabernacle. And they want to have the audacity to criticize our messenger, who never had a dollar or a dinar in his pocket with any of the spoils of war that he supposedly collected. He always spent it on Ummah. He spent it to make people smile and their happiness. And again, we can't go into his charitable acts, we'll be here all night. But that's a very good subject. I suggest a lot of you read it. You can even go to Google. I don't encourage that. But as long as the reference is there, Google's okay. As long as you can know exactly what he did. Another aspect that ties with money in the cult leader mindset is total domination and power. How did he treat the people that he controlled? We already looked earlier at the compassion he had with the Abyssinian migrations. He did not want his followers to bear more than they could bear. We look at the Hijra. You know, he didn't go first. A cult leader, a traditional cult leader, would have been the first out of it. L. Ron Hubbard, when he was running fraud in Europe, he was the first one on the boat. He left his followers behind to get arrested. He was the first one that sailed on the seas to get away from potential, wrongdoing. The messenger of Allah stayed in Mecca because he wanted to make sure that the vulnerable got out first and they were protected. He went later because he knew that he still had the protections, basically because of his family lineage. There would have been some issues there, but he felt relatively safe. But he let his followers go first. He stayed. Now I want to talk about one of the most heartwarming examples when we deal with power and the way people view you. And that's the story of his adopted son, Zayd. They used to call him Zayd ibn Muhammad. You know, Zayd was captured by the time he became a male servant with his family, about probably the age of 10 to 12, in what would present day be around the Riyadh, Najd area of Saudi Arabia, Central Arabia. He was sold as a slave on the open market and purchased by a gentleman, a trader in Mecca, who later gave this young boy as a gift to a woman. That woman's name was Hadijah. You know, Zayd grew up in her household for many years. And when she married the Prophet ﷺ, he was a wedding gift to him. They were quite fond of each other. Now, granted, what we always hear, the messenger had slaves. We're going to see exactly what that means here in a minute. Zayd and Muhammad were almost inseparable, ﷺ. And what happened one day, something very interesting, and this is, again, one of the many signs of our Lord, is Zayd was in the market, recognized some of his tribesmen. And they said, oh, yeah, he sent a poem to his family, letting his father know, hey, I'm with a very good family. I am well treated. I'm okay. You don't have to worry about it. Once this mission caravan went back to their tribe, they gave that letter. His uncle and his father hopped on the camel immediately, and they went off to Mecca. When they got there, I think they were under the impression, like a lot, well, we're going to buy our son's freedom. We're going to save him. He's probably oppressed. They found something completely the opposite. When they got there, first thing the messenger of Allah said, this is your family. Go. You're free. They're your family. Go. His father and uncle were expecting, of course, you're going to come with us. You're going to go back. He said, no. And he said, and it's almost tear-jerking, he said, there's just something about this man. There's just something in this man. I cannot go. I cannot leave. I'm not sure. I mean, this was before the call. This was before, he became a messenger. When the messenger got the call, after he told his wife, a few others, Zayd was right there, just like Abu Bakr. You say it, I believe it. No ifs, ands, or buts. You've never lied to me before. Why would you lie to me now? But this man chose it right there in front of the Kaaba. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, now he's my son. And they referred to him later on as Zayd ibn Muhammad. Now, there's, of course, a lot of stuff that went down later, with that title would later be changed because of the Arabic tradition that was going on at the time of adopted sons taking the names, and that was considered to be kind of, practice. But adopted son is not your son. They come from their own lineage, their own family, which they should respect. Obviously, they should respect the adopted parent, in this case, the Rasulullah. So what person could you think, if you went to a slave in the 1800s in the United States. If you went to a slave in the 1800s, anywhere around the world, for that matter, North Africa, the Middle East, Far East, and you said you want to stay here or you want to come back home with your family, what would any of them say? No doubt. They would have said, please get me out of here. You know, so what really was slavery according to the messenger of God? It was not the slavery that we've been taught and we've learned in the books of forced servitude. You know, it was not any of that. In fact, it is disclosed many times that you treat a slave as your equal. You treat your slave, you clothe him, you feed him the same as you feed yourself. And in this case, again, he was so good that he chose him over his own family. Again, mashallah, you know, amazing story that we can see there, where we can see the kind of love and, you know, compassion, you know, that this man had. Another aspect we were talking about on this point when it came to power and controlling your people. Cult leaders don't like to work. Did Rasulullah work? You bet he did. When the Battle of the Trench, when they dug the trenches around Medina as a type of warfare, Rasulullah was told many times by his men, you're too old, go inside. No. He continued to dig. When the Masjid of Medina was built, he was right there with his sleeves rolled up, just like everybody else. He walked in the hot sun. He rode in the hot sun. He never asked his men to do anything he would not do himself. Now they ask, okay, well, did Rasulullah fight on the front lines? What general or military commander in history ever fights on the front lines? You know, obviously it was best beneficial to the Muslims for Rasulullah to stay back, but he was involved in quite a many of skirmishes. His front teeth, you know, were knocked out by a rock on an occasion. In the Battle of Hunayn, he rallied the troops by himself, standing in the middle of the canyon, along with Ali, you know, on whom be peace as well. So you find, again, many examples of this type of leadership, this type of love, this type of dedication, you know, to his community that you simply will not find in any of these supposed other religious figures. Anyone have any questions before we move on to the final major section here?
Dr. Zayd al-Haritha, radiallahu anhu, mentioned Surah Al-Ahzab. In the beginning of Surah Al-Ahzab, and also in and the only name of the companion of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned Surah Al-Ahzab. Zayd minha dhahaba. And the reason also there is no adoption in Islam. The adoption, we can support a child, but not to have a child under my name. You can support a child, male or female, yes. Also rules and regulations. That does mean if I die, if I die, he cannot inherit me. Even I support him. My son, yes. My daughter, yes. My father, my family, yes. But not the one adopted son like Zayd ibn Haritha. And that's in more details. Surah Al-Ahzab, the beginning of Surah Al-Ahzab, and in the end of Surah Al-Ahzab as well.
When Zayd was, fortunately, of course, martyred, you can say, in the Battle of Mu'tah, and he got, I don't know if I pronounced the Arabic right, that long A. So, the messenger was always known, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to have this cool demeanor when there were stories of people who died in battle. When he heard of this, he wept to the point they described it in hadith, is translated as sobbing, passionate, crying when he heard the story of Zayd and Mu'tah. You know, again, the type of love and brotherhood that those two men had, you know, it just can't be stated enough. And we saw some examples there. Now, for those of you who are new Muslims, I want to pose this question to you. In your journeys, or I should say, reading conflicting opinions, what is one of the major attacks that you always see that is levied against our messenger? What do the people of the West love to bring up? Someone tell me? Yes, we will get to that. How many wives? They're all combined. His dealing with women. We come now from a culture, which this is the irony, where they have no objection to a 13-year-old girl going out alone and having 5 boyfriends a month. There's no objection there. But if you married a woman and you took care of her, you looked after her, you were her guardian, you were her rock, her shoulder to cry on, oh no. That's abuse. He's using them. This is the type of world we live in, brothers and sisters. I feel sometimes there was a show that came on American television in the 1960s referred to as the Twilight Zone. Everything's upside down. Everything is backwards. What is morality? Ain't morality anymore. What's anti-morality all of a sudden is morality. So we're going to look at now the nature of his marriages and his relationships. As I described earlier, we talked about Khadijah. This was his first, wife. He married her. She was 15 years his elder. Khadijah was obviously a widow. Khadijah had been married before. The messenger of Allah loved her and spoke favorable of her, and also wept when she passed during the year of grief, right before, the things really started to get bad during that period of time in his life. This lady looked at, she was the shoulder that he cried. When he first saw the angel Jibreel, had no idea. That's another one, we'll talk about that in a later presentation. They say that he was demon-possessed because he was fearful, when he saw Jibreel. Now, I'm saying for myself personally, if I saw an angel in front of me, I'd probably initially be pretty fearful myself as well. It takes a bit of time to adjust, and then you kind of become overwhelmed, in the moment. So it ain't an easy mission. But he was the one he came to. He was with this woman, again, as I mentioned, until she passed. You didn't see any evidence of any other adultery, zina, proprieties, any issues of negligence, anything of the sort. We move on from there. You had Sauda. And Sauda was his second wife. There's a little bit of debate between when the marriages of Sauda and Aisha. I read most of it. That she was before. Her husband had came with the migration along with her to Abyssinia that I had mentioned earlier. Sauda was an elderly woman. She was 50 years old. She was a pious woman. So many things were discussed favorably about her. She was known as a mother later on in the life to Aisha, Hafsa, and some of the other wives. She all took care of them and raised them like she was their own mother. She was a kind of extra motherly figure, if you will, in the Prophet's household. So we don't see anything here resembling what our opponents like to say from this first marriage. Nothing. We see an example of a man who saw a widow, whose husband had died, who was known as a pious person, saying, "My sister, I will marry you. I will take care of it. I will assume that responsibility." Because again, our opponents, apparently, they're not familiar with what constitutes a husband in our deen. The Quran lays that out pretty clear of what the responsibilities a husband has onto his wife and how a husband must honor his wife. So Sauda was first, and then you have the one, and the brothers here, they highlight it. It's always the first thing, and that's the one that raises the controversy. Aisha. We say it, how would I say that properly? It's always say Aisha, the English. The aleph, not the aleph, but the ayin, right? Gotta hold up for my Arabic, inshallah, one day. It's always the one weakness for me. Arabic is so hard for me. Even when I know how to correctly say things, it's just, especially the rolling the R. That's a really hard one to do. Now, who was Aisha? The daughter of Abu Bakr, as-Siddiq. The one who first person he told, he said, "Hey, I have this happen to me. I believe you." No ifs, ands, or buts. He believed him without hesitation. So obviously marrying his daughter would strengthen the ties of bond between these two men. Aisha would grow on to be one of the most amazing teachers of Islam, hadith narrators. She taught classes. She was extremely knowledgeable. Her life became, that of, admiration. She was not some, you could say illiterate, someone who was consequential. She was a big figure, in early Islamic history. We look at the age thing. Now, I've answered this question several times to Christians in debates that I've had in my offices and break rooms. The average life expectancy of a person during the time of the messenger was about 28 to 32 years old, give or take, depending on what you're looking at. Infant mortality in that era was high. People lived less. You can tell when a person is biologically ready to be married by the fact that they can reproduce. They have the necessary components, in place. Once that happens, the woman is a woman. The man is a man. You had boys on the battlefields in Rome and Greece, 11, 12, 13 years old, fighting in wars. Even in the recent times in this country, the American Civil War, we saw young boys about 12, 11, also with muskets, fighting in wars. During that time, marrying to someone of this age was not something that was uncommon. There was nothing wrong with it. Modern studies have even shown that women, when they have children under the age of 15, are much more likely to recover, and the baby's much more likely to have no issues. God is telling us about our biology. We are made to marry young, take on responsibilities young. In the West, they tell us, oh, you're not a man till you're 22, and you graduate from college. You have all these things, you pay your own bills, but really are you? What makes a man is experience. I've been around the block, worked in many industries. I've met men who were 18 years old, and they were more of a man than 50-year-old men who I had as my boss. Those guys were thrust early in life into hardships, and they maturated very quickly. We cannot use age, here as any kind of a barometer, any kind of a judgment on his character, his morals. And again, she was his wife. I guarantee our opponents would have no objection if a 12-year-old girl was having a boyfriend or was engaged in all kinds of other improprieties. I guarantee they would say nothing. Again, she was his wife. He looked after her. She grew on to become a very instrumental figure, in our religion. We look at Hafsa, who came next. She was known as Masakin. She was known for her charitable acts. She was the daughter of Umar. Another strengthened relationship that we find basically between the messenger and his companions. This woman was so noble, she would spend every single penny she had if it meant helping someone. Hardly the kind of woman you marry if you're going to want to, there's a saying in English, sow your wild oats or something like that. I mean, hardly the type of woman you would want to marry if you could say gratification was your motivation. Again, she was a widow. Her husband was killed. The messenger took care of her. Another woman with an exceptional, moral character. Now, this one right here is very, mashallah, when you look at what happens here. Now, the Sheikh's going to have to help me with this name. I've referred to this woman numerous times. You would pronounce it here in the Arabic. This would be wife of Banu Muslim.
I can see. What lady?
She came from the Banu Muslim tribe. I'll tell the good story of that one. Juwariya.
Juwariya.
The Westerner, I've researched it off and on decade, but it's just, it's a tongue twister, in our language. This marriage right here is one of the many, many examples of how so many of them ended up being during the later years of the Prophet's life. She was from the Banu Muslim tribe. She was the daughter of the tribe's chieftain, who Muslims were at war. And prisoners and captives had been exchanged on both sides. And the father had came and wanted to buy her freedom. The messenger of Allah declined. He wanted to liberate her, so to speak. The messenger of Allah declined. The messenger of Allah ﷺ asked to marry him. She agreed. He granted her a freedom. And you know what? Hundreds of families of captives were released, mashallah, because of her. And the war ended. Hostilities became this. Softened hearts. Hardly a marriage purely for material gain or physical gain. This marriage transcended, that. We look at Safiya, we see the same thing. You had Banu Nadir. After the Battle of Khaybar, this woman was widowed. Her husband was killed. She was captured. The Messenger of Allah, ﷺ, as he always did, looked out for every aspect of public life. He liberated her. He proposed to marry her. She accepted. And so much so that her quotes about him are very telltale. I've never met anyone other than this man with such generosity. She loved him so much that when he was dying, she said, I wish I was in your place. I wish I was the one suffering so you didn't have to, for all the good things. MashaAllah. Hardly a marriage that our opponents would like to describe when we read the blogs and all the things that we've been talking about throughout the day. So, again, we look at what is marriage today. And we compare these stories. That he had other wives, similar stories. We don't have time permits to go into every aspect of it. But let's look at marriage in the West. 70% divorce rate. I'm one of those. I came from a home, no father in the home, raised by a single mother. It's not easy. It took me learning on my own how to be a man. There was no man in the home. We look at statistics of children of single mothers in this country. About 50% raised in suicide, over 50% raised in drug dependency, and a lot more other social and mental problems. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not make men and women for any other purpose but to be together, to be partners in this life and raise children and grow families together. And when you see that bond is broken, fractured, you see the chaos. And that's why the enemies, the people that rule this world, the representatives of the shaitan, if you will, are so adamant now. I've got to attack the family. Whatever way we can, we'll attack marriage, we'll attack the husband, we'll attack masculinity. We're going to talk about masculinity and femininity. We are going to have a lecture in a couple of weeks, maybe next week. I haven't decided on the order yet, called Defending Our Sisters. We are going to talk about male responsibility to man up and be the men that we're called upon to be, and protect our women again, which is something we're just not seeing happening in modern day society. So marriage in the West is something you sign for fun. They even have in Las Vegas, you can get married by an Elvis impersonator in 15 minutes. Hardly a ball, yeah. You can go to Las Vegas and be intoxicated and go see an Elvis impersonator, a guy dressed like Elvis who'll sing for you and everything. And he'll marry you in an Elvis accent. And you're now husband and wife. That's how cheap marriage has become in this society. It is a joke. And these are the same people that I mentioned are going to go after and attack our messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with all these beautiful women that he married, beautiful on the inside. And the way that he dealt with every one of them, they are going to have the audacity to criticize and challenge that. I mean, may God forgive them. May God guide them. So to sum this up, I try to take on the task today through his properties, his characteristics. I didn't want to bore you and go on too long, but I wanted to give a very quick, hard-hitting introduction to his life. We will do more courses in the coming weeks and months where we will focus on more specific events in detail. I want to call that series Getting to Know Our Messenger, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where we will spend an entire lecture maybe on a battle of virtues in a particular incident. We'll go a lot more into detail. But to summarize, we've seen the way he dealt with people. We see that slaves chose to stay with him over their own families. We see the compassion he had by staying in Mecca in harm's way, letting others get out to ensure their safety. We saw the compassion he had when he allowed migrations to take place of his followers. No cult leader would allow their people to go away because cult leaders live off their people's wealth. They live off their people's hard work and money. We've seen how virtuous his marriages are. We've seen how trustworthy he was to people in the society of Mecca before he even became what we know today as Rasulullah. I found a beautiful quote that I wanted to end with, and I wanted to leave the last word with famous Islamic figure, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. When he was part of that second migration to Abyssinia, he went down there and he was the eloquent one. He was the one what we call the silver tongue who spoke well to explain the Muslim position to the king of Abyssinia. And of course, the Meccans pursued with their falsities. He said, "O king, we were plunged in the depth of ignorance and barbarism. We adored idols. We lived in unchastity. We ate dead bodies, and we spoke abominations. We disregard every feeling of humanity. We disregard every feeling of humanity and the duties of hospitality and neighborhood. We neglected. We knew no law but that of the strong, suppressing the weak. When Allah raised us a man whose birth, truthfulness, honesty, and purity, we were aware." So right there, he's saying, basically, he raised a man. We already were aware of his qualities, his characteristics. But before we get the second part, let's focus a bit on the beginning of it. Strong, suppressing the weak. No hospitality. We'll get to some of the other things. Burying baby girls. We didn't talk about that's another virtue. One of the first things Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stopped. The baby girls. Our opponents have come back with that now. They call it abortion. They give it a nice sounding medical procedure like name, but it's nothing more than killing children. That's all it is. They want to give it a name to make it seem like it's a procedure. It is murder. It always was murder. He stopped it. You know, of course, people were eating dead animals. They were walking around the Kaaba naked. They worshipped a variety of idols. Drunkenness and zina ran wild in society. We see that mentioned. And then he talks about raising this man, calling us to oneness of Allah, and taught us not to associate anything with him. He forbid us the worship of idols and enjoined us to speak the truth, to be faithful to our trust, to be merciful, and to regard the rights of neighbors and kith and kin. He forbade us to speak evil of chaste women, or to eat substance of orphans, stealing their property. He ordered us to flee the vices and abstain from evil, offer prayers, render alms, observe fasts, and we have believed it. That's what we can tell our opponents, who the messenger of Allah is to us. Allahu Akbar, thank you guys for coming. Any questions?
Why do old men sound so much older?
Well, Rasulullah was in Oh, sorry, I didn't read the question out. My young brother here asked me, he said, why were the women always, older? These were not younger women. Because often the image, again, that the West is presenting was that the messenger was a warlord who was having a harem of all these beautiful women in a tent. And we know that's just un-Islamic. For one, it's not true. It's historically inaccurate. So those women were married in most cases, as I highlighted, because of their piety. Piety knows no age, taqwa. We call it in the Arabic, who you are as a person. Like I mentioned, charity being given by several of them. They were known as women who spend their last penny. They were women who brought peace between tribes. They were women in his attempt to reconcile relationships with Jews, in the case of Safiya, to bring them back in the fold of the original religion of the one true creator, the one true God. So age did not matter to our messenger. His first wife was 15 years, older than him. Now we see, my wife is 1 year older than me. I had several people over the years ask me, why? Why don't you marry a woman who's younger, than you? I said, does it matter? At the end of the day, it's what's in here. The looks go. I hope to be pretty until I'm 60, but I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, we all gonna, go down that, path. Looks go, but the person and the soul is eternal.
So, Sunnahfollowers, if you have any question also, Brother Youssef will speak, the answer, inshallah. Sunnahfollowers, inshallah.
Just want to comment about bringing the importance of family in Islam and how the West now is trying to attack this institution that make the strength of this ummah go.
Very good comment by the brother here, and he was just commenting on the ending part when we were talking about the family. The shaitan hates us. And I've always talked, and you can see this in the ayah, when the shaitan was asked, Adam, I'm better than him. No way. I'm going to go to you and I'm going to show you that I'm better than you. The shaitan wants to run us in the ground, make us hate ourselves, ashamed of our bodies, ashamed of everything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. And that's why you see everything now is inverted. It's upside down. It's the opposite of reality, opposite of the way God made it. We eat food that's not food. We engage in relationships which are not, we're not created to be that way. And I'm not going to go into those people here tonight. That's a whole other, but it's inverted. The shaitan wants to see nothing more than us genocide off the face of this earth and in misery. And what better way to do that than destroy the family, destroy the foundation? You ever watch a television show now in America? I refrain from television. My guilty pleasures, I do like circus. But I try to refrain from the rest of the circus because it's nothing more than indoctrination. You see the family, the wife hates the husband hates the wife, the kids are bad. They make family life look horrible. It's not something you want. If you're a young person today and you're watching these programs, look how miserable those people are. Then they show you the single mothers reality shows where you see them, they're having the time of their life and their drunkenness and drug-induced, states and being, and that's presented as that's the pinnacle, of existence. And you're right. I mean, the family is central to what we do. It's everything. It's what separates us. I don't want to get into my conversion because, again, it's not the time for that. But the first time I saw a Muslim in my life was at Universal Studios in 1997. I remember this last time I was in Florida. It was in 1997. Me and my friend were walking. Me and my best friend were traveling. There was a woman, sister, we called her at the time, and she was wearing a niqab. And we were like, we saw something. What is this? What is going on here? Who is this person? Why would she dress like that, in the heat? We saw the women walking around with hardly anything as normal. And we saw this woman who's covering, who's being modest, as something wrong. Now, I was still, at the time, I was 18, so I'm not the person who stands before you today. Obviously, I made fun of her, and so did my friend. We thought, what is this? Later on, I saw a couple more, Muslim women that were walking around the store. And I remember saying, there's something about this that's different. I couldn't tell if a girl was a Christian or a churchgoer or not. There's nothing that told me that. She dressed the same, did the same things, acted the same. But when I saw these sisters in Islam, it's different. She looked something unique. I want to find out more about this. And this kind of was, again, one of the beginnings of me getting heavily immersed in a religion, because you can see the changes, in people. I've seen so many people, they go and they profess that Jesus died for their sins, the same guy the next day. I don't see much. But I've seen so many brothers come over the years of Islam and just seen them do a 180 from the way that they've changed. And mashallah, because when you're following the truth, you will change. Any questions?
Sunnahfollowers, any questions?
Yes, we have a couple of questions here from Sunnahfollowers. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good, because I'm behind this camera. Okay. Yeah. Well, first of all, I'd like to welcome you, Brother Youssef. This was such a very informative discussion. Your last week's was informative too, and I broadcasted it, and I got a lot of good positive response from people from all over the world, because I'm streaming live everywhere now. And so we have a bunch of young kids here from Twitch, the gaming site. They've joined us and they listened to the lecture. And here's a couple of questions for some of the youth. One of the youth said, "What can we do, sir, to..." Are you from France? Because you're speaking in French now. Type it. Je ne parle pas maintenant. Okay, he's French. No, he's in French. Okay, what can we do, sir, to change the misconceptions people have of the prophet marrying Aisha so young? What can we do to make them see it's not pas mal, not bad?
Very good question. And I've wrestled with this one because I'm coming obviously from this society. And I see all the time, this is what they ask me, "Oh, well, you're following a prophet who was a pedophile." A pedophile is a strong word, obviously. We're not going to get into that. There's children, listening. But one of the things that we have to do first and foremost is educate ourselves about the nature of the marriage, like I talked about, how much love was there in the house, how much respect, admiration. And what I'd like to stress is that this was not just Rasulullah. You can go look through the Old Testament and you find this was the norm. This was something that went on in those days throughout. So any Christian or Jew or someone who's a follower who holds the Old Testament with esteem is going to see their prophets and their historical figures also doing the same. And again, like I pointed out, there would be life expectancies and people being different. Me, I have all this facial hair now. I was one of those people. I had a beard when I was 11 years old. I matured like physically very, very early on. Some people matured at 14 and 15, as an example. And it's the same for girls. She was obviously wise above her years. We see that in her body of work. I talked about the life expectancy, and I think we have to really just get out of the Western thinking that you have to be 18, go to university, spend 4 years being indoctrinated into their secular education there. Then you get a job where you spend 60 hours a week working away, and then you get married. We need to build societies that are tailored on our young people getting married, assuming these responsibilities early. It prevents zina. It prevents all the, you saw the pornography and all the sin that's out there for our young people have to wrestle with now. I mean, to be in a healthy marriage from an early age, this has always been that it has. And the attacks are never going to stop on that marriage question. So I hope I answered.
I have a comment really important. The history in that time until now, by the way, they get married actually 6 and 7 years old. They become mature in the Arabia, especially in the Arabia, extremely hot. They become mature women at 6 and 7 years old in that time. Until now, Saudi Arabia, actually in that area, they're also 10 and 12 years. Even in Palestine, in my city, Gaza Strip, also 10 and 9 and 12 years old and 14 years. I have 5 sisters, by the way. They get married at 14 years old. My sister, until now, by the way, I'm talking about right now, 14 years in Gaza, 13 years, mature woman, they have kids in that time. So it's a culture. A culture.
And yeah, as harken to his point, in the state of Alabama, I mean, some of the southern states, up until recent times, it was 13 and 12 in some places where you could be married. But again, no one had an objection to that. And they never brought it up, only when they attacked the messenger of Allah. Only then is it now they are Mr. Moral, these people who I was talking about who have no morals when it comes to family and togetherness. But when it comes to this issue, they want to become moral.
And the brother Youssef, something very important, he mentioned in the beginning about Aisha, the majority of the deen of women religion, our deen, from Aisha herself. Our religion, our deen, most likely from Aisha radiallahu ta'ala, especially what like a family fiqh at that time. From Aisha. She's a scholar, Aisha. She's young, but a scholar.
And yeah, the maturity question I talked about, some people, their lives, who they grew up with, who their parents were, what their surroundings were, they make them maturate rapidly. I said I've met 18-year-olds who are more brilliant, more responsible than I've met a 50. And I've met young people, and I look at that 13-year-old, I say, wow, you are a man. You have that maturation. And what the Sheikh was saying, all her life's work is a tribute to that, showing what kind of a woman she was.
Any more questions, Sister Leila?
Yes, another question. One of the girls here is asking, one of the things that she's confronted with a lot is why isn't she hot? Why does she dress like that? Why isn't she hot? And she said it really makes her feel funny. Can you tell her what's a good response to when they ask her, aren't you hot?
Well, first question I want to take to the sister is, sister, you're a queen, and you need to walk around with your chest out with pride for what you're doing. Never let them make us feel that we are different. It's them who are different. It's them who are unnatural. They are the ones following the path of destruction. So this part of my theory is I want to do a thing called making Islam cool. Because I hate hearing stories like this where especially our sisters are picked on and made to feel weak for their deen. When it should be the other way around, the sister should be saying, aren't you cool with what you're doing? Don't you feel vulnerable with what you're doing? Because the type of attention that sister, the young one who asked the question, is going to get is going to be overwhelmingly positive. She's going to be more respected by people. She's going to be seen as a lady, when she grows up. And when they ask her about being hot, she's saying, well, it's worth it. Because of all the positives I'm gaining from wearing this hijab and wearing this. I'm following the one true God. I'm following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm going to have the respect of a man one day who I'm going to call my husband. I'm going to raise a good family. I'm going to live a clean life. And the people who are picking on her, unfortunately, cannot say the same thing. So I hope that we can use these to really instill pride in these young girls, especially that you've got nothing to be ashamed of. You are a queen. You are the best of women that God has ever raised up.
Sister, I went to the gym, by the way, and suddenly I saw a man with a beard also, and it saw like this. And a woman with him with niqab. She was black. And so I thought they come to the gym. Come to the gym for exercise. And in the exercise, I watched. And the whole gym, everybody, and not only that, they're completely quiet. And I want to watch myself. And then after exercise, they went to the ring, and that's niqabi sister, I found it in her father, and with the thumb, The thumb will take the thumb, the sun, and the shoulder under that, and they have a fight. I never see a fight in my life like this. And then that's it. Like I do karate too. I went to, by the way, my name is Ibrahim Dremali, so and so and so. So, oh yeah, we know you. No, Sheikh, join us. Honestly, sister with niqab, with hijab, be proud of yourself. You are number one. You are a warrior. Number two, they are envy you. They are jealous. They are jealous because your hijab make you more beautiful, especially young, especially with university and college. You are the most beautiful lady inside your college. Trust me with that.
100%. Yeah, and I hope again that this class is, lead to this positivity being raised, and we're going to do a session Islam in school. Because again, we should be
like that.
We should be the ones walking around, saying, you guys should, we're right. We're the ones that know. We're the ones that live clean. We're not the ones that have all these Western problems that we're describing. I want our sisters to have.
I just want to tell to the young lady that she has to be proud of being a Muslim. Believe in herself. And if you see now our athletes, as Muslim athletes, on the highest level, you see Adidas company, you see Nike company now making hijab for our women. So we are now no longer to be ashamed from who we are, but we are even represented on the highest level or on international or the whole world, the entire world, like on sport events and other different fields, science and so you are on the right side, and people who are mocking you are ignorant, but keep doing what you're doing and study and stick to your Islam. That's gonna be, you'll be proud of it in the coming years.
Any more questions, Sister Sunnahfollowers?
Yeah, that's all I have. They said thank you so much. They really enjoyed this.
And inshallah, we'll be back next week. And I have a topic I'm deciding between two. Most likely we will go with defending the sisters next week. We're going to talk about what our obligations are as men. We'll have one for the ladies later as well, from the Islamic perspective. And we're going to talk about the vulnerabilities of women, us as men, what we have to do, what we're neglecting in this modern world, letting our girls fall prey to this type of poison that's out there. And this poison, first and foremost, it goes after the women. Because the shaitan knows the woman, her natural nature. The woman is the raiser of the child. She's more suggestible. So you find most of this propaganda is going after our young sisters. And we're going to do the best we can as men to stop that, as much as we can within our own families and children.
And Sister Layla, we bring you pizza here for the kids. So I need all the sisters and the followers in America and outside the United States of America also, get the pizza 8:45.
Alhamdulillah.
These are the rules of Sunnahfollowers. Inshallah, pizza for the kids to listen to your brother Youssef next week.
Yes, alhamdulillah. Yeah, they enjoyed this because school's out for the summer. And so these kids were on the Twitch gaming site and the D Live gaming site. They saw the sign, Sunnahfollowers, they stopped gaming and they're listening. They're from different parts of the world, some from France, some from Canada, and a few from America. Yeah.
Takbir! Jazakallah khair, inshallah. Brother and sister, inshallah, we'd love to see you next week. And thank you for the food also. And we'd love to see you again. Jazakallah khair. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.